Hello, good morning, hail, well met. What is up, people of the internet? 'Tis I, Bones McKay, and we're talking about something. It's Monday, and on Mondays I get to talk about whatever I want. If you hear some crazy noises in the background that sound like bells, it is not the sound of you clicking the bell icon. It is my cats. I just gave Miku a worm on a string, but it doesn't have a string, it has a bell. She loves these things. She's like, oh, worm, dated meme or whatever, but she is into it. She's just been sitting for hours throwing this thing around. I'm happy for her. I'm happy that she has found her calling in life, and she is not bothering me or turning on my piano, which is her other hobby, is playing piano. Very cool of her. Hello. As usual, I have no clue what I was going to talk about. It's NaNoWriMo still. Funny that. Funny that, because, I guess, it's still November. If you didn't hear about it last time or another time previous, NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month. You're supposed to write a novel in a month. And I am not doing that. I'm being a rebel. I'm working on my editing. And I was talking to a patron because I do Patreon one-on-ones where I read a whole bunch of writing and then I sit down and have a chit chat and help with that. Apparently it is a steal. So yeah, if you ever want that exists. But I was talking, and I came to the conclusion that I hadn't really talked about editing all that much. I haven't talked about my editing process. I remember when I sat down to edit things for the first time, I had no clue what to do, and it was very hard to find advice on what to do. I don't know what that is. I feel like people's editing processes are even more varied than their writing processes. Oh, another cat has joined the fray. Wow. Okay. It's crazy what's happening beside me, guys. And then my other cat's yowling, popping off. I'm gonna check the security cam real quick, and I'll tell you the status of our fourth cat. Because she doesn't like people. Or, I don't know. She likes a person before. So, she is sleeping. She's good. Checking the camera. All she ever does is sleep in the spot, but at least it's not under their toilet anymore. Sorry, I got completely distracted there. Right, I find people's editing processes are even more varied than their writing processes, and they're not great at giving you advice on what to do, and that's fair. And I don't know if I've ever talked about it, because honestly, I don't know how many people want to hear about it, but I wanted to hear about it, so maybe I should talk about it. And since this is a Monday video, I'm not doing a great job at it. Not that I do a great job on Fridays either. So, editing process. So what I'm doing right now is I'm working on my 2.5 draft. 2.5, yeah. In theory, when it comes to editing, there's you do your content edits, you do your line edits, and then you do your copy edits, which is just all the grammar and stuff, and also consistency and other things. But it's more nitty gritty. It's the most nitty gritty, and I guess that's a fair general rule. But I found the idea of doing content edits and line edits separate to be really weird. I understand it on some level, but on another level I don't. Because I think everything's just so linked together. I don't know how you can line edit without inherently changing the content. Sometimes I just don't see the piece until it's fully cleaned up. It just doesn't work until then. I don't know. For me, what I usually do is, so first off, I write my stories by hand in little notebooks, and that's how my first drafts go. It's been a recent development that I did this, but it's where I started. I went back to my roots with this, and then I take some time away from it, and then I type it up, dictate it on the phone, and then clean that up because the dictation is never good, and that gives me time to really think about the piece a little more. After that, I usually sit down and read it. For me, I'm not much of a reader. I'm kind of dyslexic, so I use an e-reading app kind of thing that turns it into like a audiobook. So I listen to that and I make note of major changes and major issues, like things that are gonna like require me to take a huge axe to the entire work. I make note of things like I need to like add and I'm working on the Books of Abo 2 right now, and one of the things that my first draft didn't have was like an arc for one character. I just kept purposefully just not wanting to write about her, so I have had to add her entire arc to the story. Part of the reason like that I have started doing the notebooks is I have a huge problem with going back to the beginning and editing, but I still do that sometimes. Like I still sometimes just quit a notebook and start from the beginning, so you know, you win some, you lose some. I think that happened to me a bit with book 2. Eventually I settled on something and it was cool. I did that with book 3 for sure. But yeah, so like I sit down, write all those major things, and then what I usually do is I divide all of the scenes. Like I use Scrivener, so I take all of the scenes and I divide them into like the first, third, and second act. I also order it based on like, I organize things based on like, this chunk has to occur before this chunk. So I do that. I usually then separate every single character arc out from each other, every POV. So I'll put like all of Erin's POV in a folder for Act 2. I'll put all of not Tria's, she doesn't have really a POV. I do all of Juliet's, I do Lul's, so I have them just in chunks. I've like completely taken them apart, because honestly, when I'm dealing with like so many like plot arcs, a lot of the times it's completely vibe based where I end up putting them. And then I kind of, from there, I go in and fill out things that I'm missing. Like, I started writing Celine's plotline. I didn't really want to write about Celine, but I started writing it, and I wrote to a certain point where I kind of needed to see what was going on around it in order to continue it. And then I went back and I started weaving the scenes together. So I start with chapter 1 and I look at all these like folders that I have for Act 1, and I start taking out different scenes and putting them together into different chapters. And I just keep wiggling those around forever, honestly. And then I get to a point where like I noticed that I'm running out of Celine scenes. So I sat down and wrote some of those. There was like a bunch of Erin scenes that I just completely needed to trash within like the second act. So I just like completely cut them and threw them out. And now I'm kind of adding scenes in the same way I'm adding them to Celine's story. And that's why I don't really want to write right now, because like right now I currently only really have Celine and Erin scenes to work on, and they're such a hot mess that it's a struggle to make myself continue. But I do that and I twist them all together. I kind of imagine it as like braiding, like do you guys do like macrame? I know all of you, every single one of you does like macrame, right? But in macrame, you have like, it's the same process as making friendship bracelets. So if you don't do macrame, friendship bracelets are exactly the same, where you're doing like a bunch of box knots. Anyways, if you can imagine it, there's like, you tie a bunch of strings to like a ring, and then you have like 4 loose strings, and then you start folding them over each other. That's what I imagine my my first content edit to kind of be like, where I separate all the plot lines as like little strings, and then I rebraid them together nicely, because sometimes, you know, like you messed up in the weaving, so it's better to start from the beginning. I don't know why I do that, honestly. I think it's I think it gives me like just a bigger, differenter perspective. I don't like to keep everything in early content editing because I don't use my brain as much, I guess. Because like if I deconstruct everything, then I have to put it back together, and I have to think about how I do that, and I have to think about how each thing leads into the next thing. I don't know. So basically I do all of that, and so after I do all of that, eventually I'm gonna hit the end and I'm gonna tie it off. I'm gonna tie it off, and then I'm gonna feel like it's done, but it's not. I don't like at this point, like in that point in the draft, there might be still huge errors going on, but I don't find usually that they are so major that I need to take everything apart. Sometimes I do. That's where I'm at in the Magpie, because I wrote the Magpie, which is one of my webtoons. Very cool. I wrote all of it, but then I don't really like how Act 6 or Book 6 and 7 are coming together, so I've completely torn them apart and I'm putting them back together. But that comes, for me, that comes with webtoon, where like I have the opportunity to do that, and I get better as a writer over the course of time to make a webtoon, so like I'm more prone to do that. With novels, it does happen sometimes. Like, I might get to the end of this draft and reread it and be like, oh god, like, this doesn't work. We need to take it apart and fix it structurally. However, like, that's usually not the case for me. For me, what usually happens after I do the major content edit is I start doing like individual plotline edits, because like when you're working with like so many like plot lines, like what usually happens is that they all like lean on each other in some way, and like I need to figure out a way to make them all connect nicely, all weave together nicely first, and then it's easier to go through for me and like change the plot lines and fix them within themselves, because I can kind of know like where structurally it needs to stay the same. And it's good to know that, because like it gives me like a guideline of like what not to change while I'm editing it. So like if I'm coming up with like a specific problem, like I don't want to change it in a way that completely disrupts all of these things that are connected to it. But sometimes you do kind of come to a point where you look at your plot line and you're like, there's no way to keep this intact, and it's better for me to just undo all of that and fix all the other plot lines. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But yeah, so like my third edit, my draft 3, I realize I'm talking about this my draft 2.5, but it's just draft 2. I don't know, like I just started it and then I didn't finish it, and then I started it again, so it feels like draft 2.5. I'm getting into the very like draft 2 part. No 0.5 is happening here. But yeah, after I'm so distracted by my cat, guys. She is having a blast. Right. For draft 3, what I usually do is I go one plot line at a time. I follow a POV, and this is kind of what got me thinking about it. Was like I was talking to the patron, and I was talking about motivations and how to track those, and how when I do edit, I sit down and I go through one plotline at a time and make sure it flows together. And I hadn't thought about that as part of my process, but it's like a very concerted effort that I do, because what I find happens is like when you're writing a story with like tons of interweaving plots, and you read the whole thing, it can feel like it goes together. But if you think of like a plot line, sometimes it just doesn't connect well to itself. Like it doesn't logically follow itself. It follows the general shape of the entire novel. And it can be like, okay, why does this character ending up in this place other than the plot? Like it feels good because like the plot brings it there, but like that's not it, Chief. That's not how it works. So like I sit down and I really track motivation and I focus on the one storyline and I bring it all the way through. And once I have that, I do another edit, which is more focused on the entirety of the story. And that's usually after a beta read. Like I find like after I've like gotten to a point where I like everything, getting people to read it and hearing their feedback then gives me ideas as to what to change throughout the entire thing, because I start looking at the entire thing again. And if it's an issue with one plot line, that's easy to fix, but sometimes there's like major issues, and sometimes things need like way bigger, way heavier hands than you want them to. Another part of my editing process is I have like alpha reading all the time. So like for me, I work with my wife and I love her, and she reads all of my stories as I am writing them. So I like send her chapters as I go and I listen to her feedback, and I find that helpful for me when it comes to like writing my story, because I can really gauge her as a reader and focus on making the story work for her, and it helps me see like where things are faltering. Ursula's not the perfect reader for me, however, because she knows my brain on a deep level that others do not. So just because Ursula understands something confusing doesn't mean anyone else does, and I find if Ursula struggles to understand something, and then I really need to like flesh it out for like the people who don't live in my brain. And like the reason like I don't think about line edits as much, because I do sit down and like clean things up and line edit and do the copy edit thing, is like for me I find like when you're looking at like line editing, when you're looking at like cleaning up your text, like I feel like half the time it changes the pacing so much. There's like just for me there's like a rhythm to like how like prose plays out, and like when you line edit you like change that rhythm like inherently, right? And like if you're using a lot of passive voice, it can really like slow things down. So when it comes down to like actually weeding out passive voice, dang, that really fixed an issue there. Maybe I do line edit. I just find like I think what I'm specifically thinking is that I don't stop line editing at any course. I think it's good to think about it. Like I know like the issue is you don't want to line edit too much and make something too pretty if you're gonna throw it out. However, I don't know. It's just I take every opportunity I get, man. Like I just keep cleaning the story over and over again. I think one thing I need to do is start looking at my story backwards a bit, because I do kind of really focus at the beginning about making it perfect, and then I kind of fall apart near the end, and I just, because I always write chronologically. Sorry, my throat is not loving talking right now. I always write chronologically, so by the end of the novel, like I want out, and that's not great for keeping a consistent like level of quality. So that's something I want to think about maybe in the future. I remember sitting down to like figure out what the frick to do with this book, and it's like so much. I'm feeling it now. Like I don't feel like all of like the events like line up entirely. I won't know until I sit down and read it. I think I'm predisposed to thinking that this book is a hot mess, just because of the way that it's built. Whereas like book one has like this very defined arc and it has a very strong midpoint, whereas book two is just kind of, it's book two. Like it's got book two problems where it's kind of all middle, and it just, I don't understand the arcs entirely. I don't really understand the plots entirely. I'm interested in what other people think about this for me. But yeah, like I'm not entirely sure where I'm going, even though I've written the entire thing. So hopefully by the end of this, I feel it in my heart and soul what's going on in this book. But as I'm like weaving it together, I'm finding like that all of the plot lines are in such disparate places. Like they're so tonally different at points which is fine, because I know in book one there is like a tonal difference, especially between like Aaron and Tria wandering around while like the city's on fire in another section of the book. Like they're just vibing. So it is good to have like varying tones to like hop between. Like that's part of the benefit of having so many plot lines. I just hope it's not like so tonally different. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm blabbing. I said I was done. I said I was done, guys. I realized Ursula didn't record anything for me to put this to. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. Thank you for listening to my ramble. I love you all. Keep writing. Good luck if you're doing NaNoWriMo. Tell me how you're doing, or pop into the Discord. I have not been on as much. Oh my god, my voice is dying. Okay, I need to stop. Damn it, I hit the record button.